the quiet hills of West Virginia, there's a legend parents whisper to keep their children from wandering at night. They say, if you see a lantern glowing deep in the woods, never follow it, because the lantern man isn't leading you home. He's leading you somewhere you'll never return from. Tonight, you'll hear the story of Lily and how she made the mistake of following the light. It was the last week of October, and Hollow Creek, a small town tucked between the forests of West Virginia, was buzzing with Halloween decorations. Lily Harris, 17, wasn't in the mood for celebration. She had just stormed out of her house after a heated argument with her mother, with her phone battery almost dead. She decided to cut through the woods to clear her head. The forest was silent except for the crunch of dried leaves beneath her sneakers. The air smelled faintly of smoke from the town's bonfires, but deeper in, it grew colder, damper, heavier. That's when she saw it, a faint, golden light flickering through the mist. It was shaped like an old-fashioned lantern, swaying gently, as though held by someone walking. "Hello." Lily called out, her voice cracking. No answer. The light floated forward slowly, like it wanted her to follow. Her curiosity outweighed her fear. She stepped off the path, leaves whispering underfoot. The deeper she went, the darker it became, until the lantern was the only thing she could see. Then pop, the light went out. The forest swallowed her in pitch black. Somewhere in that suffocating silence, a voice whispered, right by her ear, "You shouldn't have followed me." Lily froze. Her breath came out in short, sharp bursts, each cloud of steam vanishing into the black around her. "Who's there?" she whispered. No reply. Then, behind her, the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps crunching over dead leaves. Step, pause, step. She turned in a panic, fumbling for her phone. The weak glow from the screen lit only a few feet in front of her. The trees looked warped, their twisted branches like skeletal arms reaching down. She took a step backward, stepped, something else took a step forward. Lily's phone buzzed once to 1% battery remaining. In the faint glow, she caught a glimpse of something between the trees, a shape too tall to be human. The lantern light flared back to life, but this time, it wasn't in front of her, it was behind her. She didn't remember turning around, but there it was, an old iron lantern, its glass fogged, dangling from a pale, long-fingered hand. The man holding it was thin, impossibly thin, wearing what looked like a ragged Civil War coat. His head was tilted at an unnatural angle, as though his neck had been broken long ago. His eyes, black pits, locked onto hers. In a voice like dry leaves scraping over stone, he said, "One more step, and you belong to me." Lily's mind screamed at her to run, but her legs felt locked in place. The lantern man didn't move toward her, he just waited. The golden light flickered in his hand, casting long, warped shadows across the trees. They bent and twisted like living things. Reaching for her feet, a deep, unnatural humming began to fill the air, low at first, then growing louder, vibrating in her bones. Lily finally forced herself to move. She bolted, her sneakers slipping on wet leaves, breath tearing from her throat. Behind her, she heard it, the slow, steady step, but the sound was all around her now, echoing from every direction. The forest seemed to shift. Trees that had been far apart now leaned in, closing her path. Branches scraped her face and arms, as if the woods themselves were trying to keep her in. She glanced back. Mistake. The lantern man was not walking anymore. He was gliding, his long coat fluttering around him, his head still tilted, eyes locked on her. Crunching over leaves that crumbled to ash under each step. She tried to speak, to scream, but her voice stayed trapped in her throat. The trees along the path whispered, faint voices hissed her name. She glanced to the side and saw faces, human faces, stretched across the bark like trapped souls, their mouths frozen in silent screams. Her stomach churned. She turned her eyes forward. But the lantern man's back seemed farther away now, as though the distance between them grew no matter how fast she walked. A question echoed in her mind. Where is he taking me? But the answer came in a voice that wasn't hers. To the hollow, where the light never dies, and neither do you. The trees parted ahead, revealing a clearing filled with faint, floating lanterns, dozens of them, hanging in midair, swaying without wind. Beneath each lantern was a figure. Some were kneeling, others lying still, their skin pale as candle wax. Their eyes glowed faintly, matching the color of the lantern above them. The lantern man stopped in the center of the clearing and turned to face her. "You've already taken the first step," he said. "The rest is only a matter of time." From the shadows between the floating lights, something else began to move. Something crawling, something hungry. The movement in the shadows grew louder, a wet, dragging sound, like something pulling itself through mud. Lily's instinct screamed at her to run, but the pale light of the lantern seemed to lock her in place then. Her fingers were blackened, nails cracked and claw-like. She crawled on all fours, her limbs bending wrong, joints snapping with each step. Behind her, more followed, dozens. Their eyes glowed faintly, just like the souls trapped inside the tree she'd passed earlier. The lantern man lifted his lantern high, and the crawlers froze mid-step, their heads snapping toward him in unison. "She's not ready yet," he said softly, almost kindly. "But she will be." Lily backed away, her heart hammering. But every step she took seemed to bring her closer to the ring of crawlers. They began to circle her slowly, their broken bodies twitching in unnatural spasms. One of them, a man with a crushed jaw and hollow cheeks, leaned close enough for her to smell the rot on his breath. He whispered, "Don't follow the light." Then the lantern man's voice cut through the clearing. Too late. The lantern's glow flared so bright it seared Lily's vision, and when she blinked, the crawlers were gone, so was the clearing. She was standing on a dirt road, just outside her own house. The front porch light was on. For a moment, relief washed over her, until she noticed the dim, golden glow still flickering just behind her shoulder. Lily spun around. The lantern man stood at the end of her driveway, the dim glow of his lantern barely cutting through the mist that now seemed to cling to everything. Her porch light flickered. She ran up the steps, fumbling for her keys, her hands shaking so badly she dropped them twice. The door finally unlocked, and she slammed it shut behind her, pressing her back against it. The house was silent, too silent. No hum of the refrigerator, no ticking of the clock on the kitchen wall. She grabbed her phone. No signal, no Wi-Fi. From outside came the faint sound of the lanterns humming again, that deep, bone-shaking vibration she'd heard in the forest. It grew louder, closer. Her living room lights began to dim, one by one, until only a single lamp by the couch remained. Then the lamp went out. The golden glow replaced it. Lily's breath caught as she saw him, not outside anymore, but inside, standing in her living room as if he had always been there. The air smelled faintly of smoke and old wood. "I told you," he said, voice low, "every light leads somewhere." She stumbled back toward the kitchen, her mind racing. She grabbed the biggest knife she could find and held it up. "Stay away from me." He tilted his head further, the bones in his neck cracking. The lantern swayed gently. "You think light protects you, but light is mine." The flame inside the lantern flared. Every bulb in the house burst at once, showering the floor with glass, and in the sudden darkness, the only thing left glowing was his lantern, now just inches from her face. The light from the lantern wasn't just shining anymore, it was moving. It rippled outward, threads of gold stretching into the air like roots searching for soil. One of them touched Lily's wrist. A jolt shot through her, cold and burning all at once. She tried to yank her hand back, but the thread clung to her skin like molten metal. Her vision blurred, the kitchen melted away, its walls dripping down like wet paint. When her sight cleared, she was no longer home. She stood in a vast black field under a sky with no stars, only hanging lanterns, hundreds of them, suspended at different heights, swaying as though in some invisible wind. The lantern man was nowhere in sight. but his voice came from everywhere at once. "Every light you see is a soul. Every soul you see thought they could escape." The lanterns began to lower. Shapes appeared beneath them, people, frozen in mid-step, faces twisted in terror, their eyes glowing the same pale white she had seen in the forest. She tried to move, but her feet sank into the ground. Looking down, she saw black mud rising over her shoes. It clung to her legs, pulling her under inch by inch. In the distance, a single lantern burned brighter than the rest. It began gliding toward her. Her chest tightened. She didn't want to see what was carrying it. The voice came again, closer now. "Once you walk with the light, the dark never wants you back." The bright lantern stopped right in front of her face. Inside its glass, she saw herself trapped, screaming, pounding against the walls of the light. Her reflection's mouth moved, and she heard her own voice whisper, "Run." The ground gave way. She plunged into the dark. Lily's eyes snapped open. She was lying in the middle of Main Street, but it wasn't the same street she knew. The buildings leaned at impossible angles, their windows yawning like open mouths. Street lamps bent over her, their bulbs glowing with that same faint gold. There were no cars, no people. Only the sound of wine that seemed to come from below her, as though the ground itself was breathing. She stood, her legs trembling, and spotted the old diner where she used to eat after school. Its neon sign flickered, buzzing. She moved toward it, needing shelter, needing anything familiar. The bell above the diner door jingled as she pushed it open. Inside, every table was set, coffee cups steaming, but there was no one there. She took one step forward, and the cups all slid across the tables in unison, spilling black liquid onto the floor. The coffee pooled and began to swirl, forming words. "He's behind you." Lily froze. The lantern's glow bloomed across the glass window beside her. Slowly, she turned. The lantern man stood outside, his head bent far to one side, watching her. He lifted his free hand and tapped the glass twice. Tap, tap. The lights inside the diner dimmed, the steam from the coffee cups curling upward into strange shapes. For a moment, she thought they looked like faces screaming silently. The front door creaked open, though she hadn't touched it. "Lily," his voice came, soft but clear, "you've walked too far to find your way back." The street outside began to shift, storefronts stretching taller, doorways melting into shadows. The town was changing around her. She turned to run deeper inside the diner, only to find the back wall was gone, replaced by a long, narrow corridor lit by swaying lanterns. And from somewhere down that corridor came the sound of crawling. The sound of crawling grew louder, wetter, as if the floor was slick with something. Lily's pulse thudded in her ears. She backed away from the corridor, but every step seemed to pull her deeper into it. The lanterns above swayed in unison, their golden light trembling like candle flames in a storm. Then she heard it. "Lily," the voice came from the dark ahead, stretched, distorted, like someone dragging her name through water. She froze. From the shadows, the first crawler appeared. It was the same crushed jaw man from the forest, his mouth opening too wide, the broken bones of his face shifting with a sickening crack. "Lily," he hissed, his milky eyes rolling upward. "He's waiting." More shapes followed, limbs bending wrong, necks jerking like marionettes. They dragged themselves forward with sharp, deliberate movements. Her skin was ice cold, her grip impossibly strong. Lily kicked hard, breaking free, and bolted forward. But the corridor stretched longer with each step, the exit always just out of reach. "You can't leave him," they whispered in unison. "You belong to the light." The lanterns above began to drop, their glass shattering on the floor. Each one released a burst of blinding gold, and in every flash, she saw glimpses of herself, older, paler, with eyes like theirs. She didn't know if she was running away from the crawlers or toward the lantern man. And then, through the final burst of light, she saw him standing at the end of the corridor, lantern raised, smiling. The lantern man's smile didn't belong on a human face. It stretched too far, teeth too many, eyes too still. He lifted the lantern higher. and the golden light surged down the corridor like a living thing. It poured over the crawlers, and they froze mid-lunge, heads bowed as if kneeling. "Come, Lily," he said, voice low but echoing in her skull. "Come see where the light ends." She tried to back away, but her feet moved forward instead, each step pulling her closer as though invisible strings were threaded through her bones. The lantern's glow wasn't just light anymore. Inside it, she saw movement, swirling shadows twisting into scenes. Her childhood home, her father laughing at the kitchen table, her mother braiding her hair. She stopped, her throat tightened. "Mom." The shadows sharpened, her mother turned toward her, smiling. But the smile warped, her jaw unhinging far too wide, eyes hollow and white. The vision shattered. Now she saw the forest, the diner, the crawlers all spinning together inside the lantern, as though they were trapped in its glass. The lantern man stepped closer. The air grew heavier. "Every soul burns here, Lily. You'll burn brighter than most." Her body trembled violently. She realized the light wasn't just pulling her, it was emptying her. The fear in her chest, the memories in her mind, all being stripped away thread by thread. She screamed and threw herself to the side, breaking whatever hold he had for just a moment. She ran, or tried to, but the corridor twisted like a snake, folding back toward him no matter which way she turned. And then the light caught her. It hit her like water, cold and suffocating. Her vision narrowed until all she could see was the golden glow. She felt herself collapsing inward, her skin breaking into shards of light, her thoughts dissolving into a warm, endless hum. Her last coherent thought was, "Don't forget your name." The lantern's glass sealed shut. Ethan Miles had never believed in the stories. West Virginia was full of them, ghost miners, witch cabins, strange lights in the woods, but they were just that, stories, until tonight. The autumn air was sharp as he crossed the old iron bridge on his bike. Beneath him, the river glinted under a half-moon. He was halfway across when he saw it, a warm, golden glow flickering at the far end of the bridge. He slowed. At first, he thought it might be a camp lantern. But it didn't sway like a flame. It pulsed, slow and steady, almost in time with his heartbeat. "Hello," he called, voice echoing across the water. No answer. He stepped off the bike, pushing it forward, the tires squeaking against the rusted metal. The glow brightened, and then he heard it. A girl's voice, faint but clear, carried on the wind. "Help me." Ethan froze. It sounded like it was coming from inside the light. He took another step, and his stomach turned cold. Inside the glow, he could see shapes. A face, pale and blurred, lips moving. It was a girl about his age. Her eyes locked onto his, wide and pleading. "Help me," she said again, and this time he saw her hand press against the inside of the light, as though she were trapped behind glass. Ethan's breath quickened. "What the hell?" he whispered. A second voice spoke, deep and smooth. "She's lost, but you can help her find her way." The glow shifted, and from its center, a tall, dark figure stepped forward, carrying the lantern. His head tilted slightly, and the golden light swelled until it painted the entire bridge. Ethan's bike clattered to the ground. Something in the light was pulling him forward, one step at a time. The girl's face inside the lantern pressed closer to the glass. Her lips formed one word this time: "Run." Ethan stumbled backward, but it was like the bridge had grown longer behind him. The lantern man didn't rush. He simply stood there, lantern raised, letting the light do the work. The girl's face inside the glass was frantic now, slamming her hands against the invisible barrier. Ethan could hear the thud with each hit, as if it was happening in his skull rather than in the air. "Don't fight it," the deep voice coaxed. "Don't waste your strength." Ethan gritted his teeth and turned to run, but the metal grating beneath him groaned like it was being pulled apart. His sneakers slipped, and he nearly fell between the gaps below. The water shimmered gold instead of moon silver. The pull grew stronger. It wasn't physical. It was inside him, urging him forward with whispers. "You're tired. Just take one step." Just one. He squeezed his eyes shut and forced himself to think of anything else. His mom's laugh, his dog's clumsy run, the feel of summer heat on his face. But the light pressed into his thoughts, drowning them one by one. When he opened his eyes again, the lantern man was closer. Much closer. The bridge around Ethan had changed. The night sky was gone, replaced by swirling gold, like he was standing inside the lantern's glow already. The metal railings twisted into shapes, bending into skeletal hands that reached toward him. The girl's face was suddenly right beside his, whispering fast and urgent. "If you look too long, you're his. Don't look, Ethan." He turned away sharply, heart pounding, but the lantern man's voice was right behind him now, hot against his ear. "You can't save her without stepping inside. You want to save her, don't you?" Ethan's foot shifted forward before he realized it. That's when something grabbed his arm, yanking him hard into the darkness. Ethan's breath came in ragged bursts as he was dragged off the bridge and into the shadowed tree line. The golden glow behind him faded, swallowed by the forest's thick blackness. "Quiet," a low female voice ordered. He stumbled over roots, barely keeping up. Whoever held his arm moved fast but with purpose, weaving through the trees like she'd walked this path 1,000 times in the dark. When they finally stopped, Ethan collapsed against a trunk, clutching his ribs. A flashlight snapped on. Being low to the ground, it revealed a woman in her late 30s, hair tied back, jacket worn and scuffed. She had the look of someone who'd been outside far too long, and liked it that way. "You're lucky I was watching the bridge," she said, scanning the woods like she expected something to follow. "He almost had you." Ethan swallowed hard. The lantern man. Her eyes flicked to him sharply. "You saw him?" He nodded, still trembling. "And a girl." She was inside the light. The woman cursed under her breath, gripping her flashlight tighter. "That means he's feeding again, damn it." Ethan's pulse quickened. "Feeding? On what? On people," she said flatly. "On their memories, their life, everything that makes them human. He keeps them burning in that lantern forever, so he can use their light to lure the next ones." The woods groaned around them, a deep, unnatural sound, like the trees themselves were shifting. She grabbed his shoulder. "We have to move. Once you've seen the light, he can track you, always." Ethan hesitated, the girl's terrified face flashing in his mind. What about her? The one inside? The woman's jaw tightened. If she's still talking, there might be a chance. But going back for her means going into the lantern. A chill ran through him. Is that even possible? Her eyes held his for a long, grim moment. Yes, but no one's ever come back. The woman led Ethan deeper into the forest, her flashlight beam cutting a thin path through the dark. Every so often, she'd stop listening. Ethan tried to keep his voice low. "You still haven't told me your name." "Clara," she said without looking back. "And you're Ethan. I heard the lantern men say it." That thought made Ethan's skin crawl. "So he knows me now." Clara gave a short nod. "And he won't forget." The forest seemed to lean closer the farther they went. Pines towered overhead, their needles whispering in a wind Ethan couldn't feel. The air had a heavy, metallic taste, and the darkness ahead looked thicker than night should be. "What's in there?" Ethan asked, pointing toward a black gap between the trees. Clara's flashlight stopped just short of it. That's where the forest folds. Places where the world's thinner, he uses those folds to move. Ethan shivered. "Move? You mean like teleport? More like." "Step sideways," she replied. "The bridge you were on. It doesn't always lead to the same place. Tonight, it was leading straight to him." The trees creaked again, but this time, it sounded like something inside them was shifting. Clara immediately killed the flashlight and grabbed Ethan's arm, pulling him behind a wide trunk. In the distance, a faint golden glow appeared between the pines. It moved slowly, weaving in and out of the darkness. Ethan's heart pounded. "He's here." Clara didn't answer. She pulled a small pouch from her jacket, sprinkling a silvery dust in a rough circle around them. The air shimmered faintly where the dust fell. "What is that?" Ethan whispered. "Salt and ash." Clara murmured, "He can't cross it unless you let him in." The glow drew closer, and Ethan could see the lantern man's silhouette again, impossibly tall, head tilting from side to side like he was smelling the air. Then the girl's voice came from the light again, softer this time. "Ethan, help me." Clara's grip tightened. "Don't listen. That's not her anymore." But Ethan wasn't sure he believed her. The golden glow stopped just outside the shimmering line of salt and ash. The lantern man tilted his head, the motion slow and deliberate, until his face, if it could be called that, was angled toward Ethan. "You're learning his name already," Clara whispered sharply. "Don't. Words have weight here." The light from the lantern flared, and Ethan's stomach lurched like he'd been dropped from a height. The girl's face appeared again inside the glow, pale and desperate. "Ethan, please. It's cold in here." Her voice cracked on the last word, and Ethan's chest tightened. He took half a step forward before Clara's arm barred his way. "That's not her," Clara hissed. "That's the part of her he's wearing like a mask." The lantern man slowly reached out one impossibly long arm, the lantern swaying from his other hand. The golden light spilled across the ground, creeping toward the salt line like liquid. It hissed and sizzled when it touched the ash, retreating slightly, but not before a tendril of it coiled upward, forming the vague outline of a human hand. It hovered just beyond the barrier, fingers twitching. "You could end this," the deep voice murmured, not quite matching the movement of the figure's body. "One step, and she's free." Ethan's mind was a storm, Clara's warnings clashing with the ache in his chest at the girl's trembling expression. Clara dug into her jacket pocket again, pulling out a small glass vial. Inside swirled a thick, black liquid. "If he tries to breach the circle, I throw this. But if you talk to him, Ethan, he'll start finding cracks in you." The golden light pulsed once, twice, almost in time with Ethan's heartbeat. Then, in the softest whisper yet, "She's dying, Ethan. You'll never forgive yourself." The circle shuddered. Clara's eyes widened. "He's getting through." The shimmering sultan dash line began to twitch, grains scattering inward as though sucked by an invisible tide. The air inside the circle turned heavy, pressing against Ethan's chest. Clara's face went pale. "He's pulling at the weak spots." "Don't look at the light," but Ethan's eyes were already locked on the girl inside the lantern. Her hands pressed against an unseen barrier, her lips trembling. "Ethan, please. He promised if you come, he'll let me go." "That's a lie," Clara snapped, fumbling with the black liquid vial. "They always lie, once you step out. You belong to him." The lantern man's head tilted further, an impossible angle that made Ethan's stomach knot. Slowly, the tall figure bent down until its lantern was almost resting on the ash line. The glow spilled out in fingers of light, curling upward like smoke, except the smoke whispered. The voices came all at once, the girl, a man crying, a child laughing, dozens of others. Overlapping, calling his name, Ethan clapped his hands over his ears, but the sound was inside his head. The ash line broke into places, the glow seeped in, crawling across the ground toward Ethan's shoes. Now Clara barked, uncorking the vial. She hurled the black liquid at the breach. The effect was instant. The golden light recoiled violently, the lantern man jerking upright. A horrible, low hiss rattled through the trees. "You burned him," Ethan breathed. Clara grabbed his wrist. "We bought seconds, not safety. Move." They bolted through the dark, the forest blurring around them. Behind them, the golden light surged again, this time faster, furious. Ethan risked one glance back. The lantern man was no longer walking. He was gliding, silently, the light growing brighter with every heartbeat. And the girl's voice still reached him, threading through the fear like a hook. "Don't let her take you from me." Branches whipped against Ethan's arms as they ran, roots snagging at their feet. His lungs burned. But Clara didn't slow until the dark outline of a building loomed ahead. It was a squat, weather-beaten ranger station, its windows boarded and roof sagging under the weight of years. Clara yanked the rusted door open just enough for them to squeeze inside. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and old wood. A single beam of moonlight cut through a crack in the boards. Dust drifting lazily in the shaft, Ethan collapsed against the wall, catching his breath. "Is it safe?" Clara didn't answer right away. She was scanning the corners, her hand hovering near a pouch on her belt. "Finally," she said, "nothing is safe, but this is a pause, if we're lucky." The inside of the station looked like it had been abandoned in a hurry, maps curled and yellowed on the walls, a desk overturned, a mug shattered on the floor. But there was something else, something that made the hair on Ethan's arms stand on end. On the far wall, in thick, tar-black strokes, a symbol had been painted. It was a crude circle, inside of which was a tall stick figure with a lantern-shaped head. Ethan's stomach dropped. "He's been here." Clara stepped closer, her voice grim. "No, this is him. His mark. Means he's claimed the place." As if on cue, the boards over one of the windows rattled violently. A faint golden glow leaked through the gaps, casting warped shapes across the room. Ethan's pulse spiked. How does he find us so fast? Clara's eyes stayed fixed on the glow. "He's not finding us. We're inside his territory. The deeper you go, the more the rules stop being yours." Warm and achingly familiar. "It's Dad, son. It's me." Every muscle in his body went cold. His father had been dead for 6 years, a car accident on a rain-slick highway. He had never gotten to say goodbye. Clara caught the change in his face instantly. "Don't listen," she warned, stepping between him and the boarded window, but the voice kept going, threading through the cracks like smoke. "I'm proud of you, son. I've been trying to reach you for so long. Just open the door. We can finally be together again." Ethan's throat tightened. His father's voice had that same soft rasp he remembered from childhood bedtime stories. The same steady cadence, the same impossible comfort. How? Ethan's voice broke. How would he know that? Clara's expression hardened. "Because it isn't him. That thing knows what's inside you. It digs and digs until it finds the wound you'll do anything to heal." A faint golden glow swelled outside, seeping between the planks, and then another voice joined in, this one broken, sobbing. "Ethan, please." It was his mother. But she was still alive, hundreds of miles away. He stumbled back, shaking his head. No, this isn't." The voices overlapped: the girl, his father, his mother, all calling, pleading, weaving around each other until they became one endless, irresistible chorus. The boards creaked as something heavy pressed against them from outside. Clara yanked a chalk stick from her pouch and began drawing a jagged pattern on the floor, muttering words Ethan didn't understand. "He's trying to break you from the inside out. Hold on, Ethan." But the golden light was growing brighter now, spilling like water through every seam. And in the center of that glow, just for a second, Ethan thought he saw 3 figures: the girl, his father, and his mother, all holding hands, waiting for him. The board splintered. A harsh blue that pushed the glow back by inches, but the lantern man only leaned in, his long frame folding through the broken window like liquid shadow, his head tilted toward Ethan. Then he laughed. It was the first sound Ethan had ever heard from him. A low, rattling sound, like air dragging through a hollow throat. From the lantern, the girl spoke again, but this time, her voice was layered with dozens of others. Men, women, children, all speaking in unison. "Step outside, bring her with you. One will stay, one will go." Ethan turned to Clara. "What does that mean?" Her jaw tightened. "It means he's offering a trade, you for me." Before Ethan could speak, the lantern man's hand swept forward, smashing through the chalk line. The golden light surged inside, slamming the walls with a force that rattled the entire station. The floorboards under Ethan's feet began to split. From the cracks, more light bled upward, and for the first time, Clara didn't look certain. The light exploded upward through the cracks, twisting the air until the ranger station no longer felt like wood and nails. Ethan blinked, and the walls were gone. In their place stood towering trees, roots curling across the floor like snakes. The ceiling had dissolved into a black sky pulsing with golden veins, but when he turned toward the door, it was still there, just long. It was impossibly far away, the distance stretching with every step he imagined taking. Clara was gripping her pouch like a lifeline, her eyes darting around. He's folded the place. We're not in the station anymore. We're inside him. The lantern man loomed ahead, taller now, his limbs dragging along the ground. The lantern at his side swung in slow arcs, casting shadows that moved the wrong way. From those shadows, things crawled out. Some were the size of children, hunched and faceless, their skin rippling like liquid gold. Others were taller, all bones and teeth, their movements jerking in unnatural bursts. Ethan's heartbeat slammed in his ears. Clara. "I know," she said, cutting him off, already pouring the black salt into a wide circle around them. "He's trying to break our sense of direction. If we lose it, we can't leave." The smaller creatures began to circle, their featureless heads tilting in unison. The larger ones hung back, their teeth clicking rhythmically. The lantern man's voice rolled through the air like distant thunder. "Trade, or stay forever." Ethan glanced at Clara. Her face was pale but steady. "Don't listen to him. We keep moving. We find the seam. One of the smaller creatures lunged, breaking the circle. The golden light surged in through the gap, wrapping around Ethan's ankles like chains. The air in his lungs froze solid. The girl's voice spilled out of the lantern again, soft and close to his ear. "Ethan, you don't have to run anymore. Just take my hand." And when he looked down, there it was, a small, pale hand reaching out of the light, trembling but steady. Ethan's heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst. That hand, small, almost delicate, hovered inches from his own. He could feel its cold radiating into his skin, the promise of relief wrapped in the danger of surrender. Clara's voice was sharp behind him. "Don't touch it." "That's not her anymore. It's him wearing her." But the hand trembled in a way that stirred something inside him. It looked fragile, desperate, just like when he'd first seen the girl in the lantern's glow from the highway. The golden light around his ankles tightened, pulling him a step closer. "Ethan," the girl's voice cracked like she was on the edge of sobbing. "It hurts. I can't hold on much longer, please." He turned toward Clara. She was still crouched, scattering more black salt into the breach, but her eyes were on him, wide, urgent, and afraid. "If you give him your hand, you give him everything. There's no coming back." The lantern man leaned closer, his featureless head lowering until the lantern swung between them. Inside its warped glass, the girl's face stared at him, half hidden in shadow. Then, without warning, the other voice came back. "Son, it's me. Let her go." "Take my hand instead." It was his father again, the one voice that could cut through every rational thought. Two hands now reached for him from the light, the girl's and his father's, both pale, both shaking, both impossibly close. Ethan's chest tightened. Every instinct screamed that whichever he chose, something irreversible would happen. But the pull of the light was getting stronger, and his body felt heavier with every breath. Behind him, the faceless creatures were moving in, their steps slow and deliberate. Clara was shouting something, maybe a warning, maybe a spell, but her voice sounded far away now, muffled by the pounding in his ears. The lantern man whispered, "Choose, or I choose for you." Ethan's fingers twitched toward the light. Ethan's breath came in ragged pulls. The two hands, the girl's and his father's, hovered before him in the golden haze, flickering as though made of smoke and light. The world around him narrowed until nothing existed but those trembling fingers. The girl's voice whispered, "Save me." His father's voice murmured, "Come home, son," for one heartbeat. He reached forward, and then something deep in his gut twisted. It was wrong. Both voices were wrong. Both hands were the same, Ethan yanked his arm back. No, the lantern man froze. The golden light around Ethan's ankles flared like a living thing in pain, tightening enough to make him stumble. The creatures circling them hissed in unison, their smooth faces rippling. Clara seized the moment. Hold still. She flung the rest of her black salt straight at the hands. The moment the grains hit, the pale skin split, revealing not flesh but threads of molten light beneath. The hands recoiled, shriveling back into the lantern with a shriek that was neither human nor animal. The golden glow dimmed just enough for Ethan to feel air rush back into his lungs. He staggered backward into the salt lime Clara had reinforced, chest heaving. The lantern man let out a sound like 100 doors slamming shut in a cavern, deep, final, echoing. You refuse, then you remain. The black forest around them began to shift again. The trees groaning and bending inward, roots rising like skeletal fingers to close them in. The ground split open in jagged lines, spilling molten gold upward from the cracks. Shapes began to crawl, dozens, maybe hundreds, their bodies made of the same molten threads as the false hands. Clara's voice trembled for the first time. He's calling all of them. Ethan glanced at her, his mind racing. So what do we do? She tightened her grip on the pouch at her belt, eyes locked on the lantern swaying in the lantern man's grasp. We go for the heart. The lantern man tilted his head slowly, as if he'd heard her. The trees were folding in on themselves now, their black bark groaning like tortured metal. Every breath Ethan took burned in his lungs. The air thick with the scent of scorched earth. Clara grabbed his wrist. We get to the lantern, smash it, and pray that whatever's inside dies with him. The lantern man stood perfectly still ahead of them, as though he had all the time in the world. The golden light within his lantern pulsed like a heartbeat every time it flared. The ground rumbled, and more molten creatures pulled themselves from the cracks. Ethan's eyes darted to the swaying light. If that's his heart, how do we even get close? Clara didn't answer. She reached into her satchel and pulled out a jagged shard of black glass, edges still glittering with faint red veins. Witch's mirror, it cuts more than flesh. The creatures began to encircle them, moving in a slow, synchronized rhythm, their headless forms swaying. Each step they took pressed the salt barrier thinner, until Ethan could see the faint shimmer of its energy fray. The lantern man tilted his head toward Clara. You think the heart is in the light. But the light is the prison. Break it, and you free me. For a moment, Ethan's thoughts stuttered. If the lantern was a prison, then smashing it might be the worst possible choice. Clara hesitated, her knuckles whitening on the shard of glass. He's lying, but the lantern man's voice was low, almost intimate now, threading into Ethan's mind. You've already felt the truth. The voices, the hands, all of them trapped here. You could let them go. The golden pulse flared brighter, and Ethan swore he saw faces, dozens of them, swirling in the molten light, mouths open in silent screams. The salt barrier snapped. The creatures rushed in. Clara shoved Ethan forward. Go? We don't have a choice. Ethan lunged toward the lantern man, the black glass glinting in Clara's hand. The molten creatures surged forward, their bodies hissing as they closed the gap. Ethan felt their heat on his skin. It wasn't the warmth of fire, but something older, hungrier, the kind of heat that felt like it could strip away his soul. Clara swung the black glass shard in a vicious arc, slicing through the first one. The creature split like fabric being torn, spilling streams of golden threads that writhed in the dirt before dissolving into ash. Keep going, she shouted. Ethan ducked as another creature lunged, its faceless head inches from his own. He drove his shoulder into it, knocking it back just long enough to push closer to the lantern man. The air around the figure shimmered with oppressive heat. The lantern swayed gently, and each movement sent a ripple through the world, trees warping, the ground tilting, the sky pulsing like the inside of a living thing. You're not meant to be here, the lantern man said calmly, as though they were discussing the weather. You were never meant to see me. Ethan forced himself closer, one step at a time. Then maybe you should have stayed in the dark. Clara leapt forward, spinning the shard in her grip. She aimed for the lantern. The lantern men moved. It wasn't fast in the way humans were fast. It was a shift. One moment he was in front of her. The next he was beside her, his hand closing around her wrist. The black glass hissed in his grip, dark smoke curling where his fingers touched it. Child of salt and shadow, he whispered to Clara, "Do you even know what you are freeing?" Ethan didn't think. He lunged, grabbing the lantern's handle. The instant his skin touched the cold iron, the world exploded in light. Faces, hundreds, thousands, screamed silently from within the glow. He saw the girl from before, her eyes wide, mouthing words he couldn't hear. Behind her, other shapes twisted in agony. Men, women, children, and one face that stopped Ethan's heart. His mother. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as the light swallowed him whole. There was no heat now, no cold, just weightlessness, as if gravity had forgotten him. The world outside vanished. He stood in a vast, endless void, the ground beneath him rippling like liquid glass. Every step sent soft echoes that bent in unnatural directions. All around him, the faces hovered. They weren't just suspended in light, they were woven into it, like insects trapped in ember. Some stared blankly, others thrashed silently, mouths opening in eternal screams. And then Ethan. He turned. His mother stood only a few feet away, her hair in the loose braid sheet worn the last night he saw her alive. Her skin glowed faintly, her eyes filled with a sadness deeper than anything human. "You can't stay here," she said softly. Ethan's chest tightened. "I can't just leave you." She stepped forward, placing a hand on his cheek. Her touch was cool and insubstantial, like the last warmth fading from a dying fire. "I'm already gone, but he's still feeding. Every soul you see here is his strength in the distance." The light bent and warped. The lantern man was here, too, but not solid. He was huge, his form stretching across the void like a shadow that had learned to walk. "You think you can destroy me?" His voice rumbled, coming from everywhere at once. "But you've already carried me inside you since the day you were born." Ethan's mother's grip tightened. "Don't listen. He's trying to make you doubt," but Ethan's pulse hammered in his ears. His mind flashed back to the nightmares, the whispers, the way he'd always felt like something watched him in every dark room. "What do you mean?" Ethan demanded, his voice shaking. The lantern man stepped closer, and the void itself seemed to fold toward him. "Why do you think I called you? You're not my enemy, boy. You're my heir." Ethan's hands shook as the truth pressed down on him like a physical weight. The void seemed to constrict, the light around the trapped souls dimming, as though the lantern man's presence was suffocating it. Clara's voice broke through, distant, muffled, like she was shouting from underwater. "Ethan, don't let him in." His mother's eyes searched his face, filled with urgency. "If you break it, every soul here will be free, Ethan. But..." Her gaze flickered past him, toward the looming shadow. "He will be free too. And if I don't?" Ethan asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Her shoulders sagged. "Then we all stay here, forever." The lantern man's shadowy form drifted closer, towering over them both. "They are dead already, boy. Keeping them here is nothing but cruelty. Be the key that ends their suffering." Ethan's mind raced. If the lantern man was telling the truth, breaking the lantern would mean unleashing something far worse into the world. But if he didn't, his mother's spirit would remain trapped for eternity. Clara's voice cut through again, louder this time, and Ethan felt her hand, real, solid, grab his arm. Her touch sent a shock through him, pulling part of his mind back toward the real world. "Ethan, we can find another way. Don't give him what he wants." The lantern man's laugh rolled through the void like a slow earthquake. "There is no other way. That's why you were born to me. To finish what I began, born to you." Ethan spat, his voice cracking. The shadow leaned closer, its hollow face inches from his. "You felt me in your blood since childhood. Every nightmare, every whisper, was my gift. I don't want to destroy you, Ethan. I want you to take my place. Ethan's knees buckled. The light around the trapped souls flickered, as if they too were waiting for his decision. His mother's hand lingered on his cheek, her lips trembling. Whatever you choose, she whispered, choose it for yourself. Not for him. Ethan looked at the lantern. Its golden core pulsing like a living heart. Break it, or keep it whole. His breath came fast, his fingers tightened. Ethan's grip tightened on the lantern, its surface pulsed under his fingers, warm like living flesh, and every beat seemed to sync with his own heart. The void trembled, all around him. The trapped souls turned their eyes toward him, thousands of them, their faces warped with a mix of hope and terror. The lantern man loomed closer, his shadow stretching impossibly wide. Do it. Boy, end the suffering. Be more than they ever let you be. Clara's voice tore through the air like a blade. Ethan, remember what he is. He's not here to help. He's here to take. His mother's hand clutched his. I'm not afraid to stay, Ethan. I've made peace with it. But you, her voice broke. You can still live. Ethan's chest burned. He could feel the lantern man in his mind now, weaving through his thoughts like smoke, twisting memories, whispering promises. You were never theirs, Ethan. You were mine. You always will be. The lantern flared, blinding light pouring out in violent waves. Ethan saw visions in the blaze, his mother holding him as a baby. Then her being dragged into darkness, Clara screaming his name. And the lantern man's grin in every shadow he never feared. His fingers shifted. He could feel the weakness in the artifact, the fault line in its frame. All it would take was one strike, one moment of surrender, and everything inside would come flooding out. The lantern man's tone softened, almost paternal. Set them free, be the one who chose mercy. Ethan's jaw tightened. His breath came in ragged bursts, and then he screamed. Lifting the lantern high above his head, he slammed it to the ground. The glass exploded in a burst of golden fire, shards scattering into the void like falling stars. The light roared outward. The golden light poured out in waves, swallowing the void and flooding the world beyond. For a fleeting moment, Ethan thought he had done the right thing. The faces of the trapped souls softened, their eyes closing as if in relief. But then, the light turned black. It didn't fade, it rotted. The warm glow curdled into a choking darkness that spilled from the shattered lantern like a living tide. Shapes began to emerge from it, some familiar, some impossibly alien. They weren't all human. Ethan staggered back. What is this? The lantern man stood among the flood, his form now solid and towering. The faint smile on his face widened. Freedom, exactly as you wished. Souls screamed as they were dragged upward, twisting into monstrous forms as the blackness reshaped them. Some vanished into the air, others sank into the earth, their laughter echoing in ways that didn't belong to human throats. Clara appeared beside Ethan, grabbing his arm. Her eyes darted wildly across the scene. We have to go, now. But Ethan's gaze was fixed on his mother. She stood in the middle of the storm, her face unreadable. Mom, he shouted, reaching for her. She looked at him, but her eyes were different, darker. The soft warmth he remembered was gone, replaced by a cold, knowing stare. You've opened the door, she said, her voice calm in the chaos. And now you can't close it. Before he could answer, her form dissolved into shadow and vanished into the growing night. The lantern man began to rise, his shape expanding until he blotted out what little light remained. Run, little key, he said softly, almost amused. Run while there's still a world to run in. The darkness surged outward, swallowing the edges of reality. Ethan and Clara turned and ran, their footsteps pounding in a world that was quickly becoming something else entirely. And somewhere behind them, the lantern man laughed, a deep, rolling sound that promised this was only the beginning. Ethan's lungs burned as he and Clara tore through what remained of the void, each step feeling heavier than the last. The ground beneath them had changed, no longer smooth blackness, but a cracked and ashen surface that crumbled underfoot. The air was thick with drifting cinders. Shapes moved in the smoke around them, just far enough to avoid being clearly seen. Some whispered, others laughed. Clara kept glancing over her shoulder. "It's not just him," she panted. "They're all coming through." Ethan risked a glance back. A fissure in the void stretched wide behind them, spilling the darkness into somewhere else. Through the tear, he saw the faint silhouette of houses, streets, their town. The realization hit him like ice water. It's crossing over. A scream split the air. One of the shadow shapes lunged from the smoke, slamming into Ethan. Its skin was like tar, its face stretched too long, eyes glowing faintly gold. He fought to push it off, but its grip was impossibly strong. Clara swung a broken shard of lantern glass, stabbing it into the creature's side. It shrieked, the sound piercing and inhuman, before crumbling into ash that scattered in the air. She yanked Ethan up. "We can't stop here. If he gets all the way through, the whole world's done," Ethan finished grimly. They ran again, the ground now sloping upward. In the distance, Ethan spotted a jagged arch of black stone, its center filled with a swirling curtain of pale light. Clara's eyes widened, a way out. But the closer they got, the more the pale light flickered, as if something on the other side was trying to shut it. The lantern man's voice rolled over the ash road, closer than before. "You can run, Ethan, but you'll always be mine." The arch loomed above them. The pale light now looked unstable, as though one wrong step could collapse it entirely. The shadows behind were moving faster, forming a tide. Clara grabbed his hand. "It's now or never." They jumped. The world folded. Ethan hit the ground hard, the breath knocked from his lungs. The pale light vanished behind him with a sound like shattering glass. They were back. The cool night air of Hollow Creek wrapped around them, carrying the faint scent of pine and wet earth. Above, the stars burned steady and indifferent. It should have felt like safety. It didn't. Clara staggered to her feet, scanning the darkened street. "We made it," she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. The houses were there, just as they had left them, yet not quite. The colors seemed muted, the shadows longer, and the silence too perfect. No wind, no insects, no distant hum of life. Ethan's gaze drifted to the window of his own home. A shape stood there, just inside the glass, tall, lean, and motionless. The lantern man, but this time he wasn't holding the lantern. His hands were empty, and he was smiling. Ethan blinked, and the shape was gone. A whisper curled through the air, close enough to feel against his ear. Keys opened both ways. "Ethan," Clara gripped his arm so hard it hurt. "Do you hear that?" Before he could answer, the street lamps along the road flickered, then went out, all of them. In the sudden dark, a faint glow appeared at the far end of the street. Not gold this time, but a sickly, pulsing green. It began to move toward them. Ethan's chest tightened. "We didn't shut the door," he said. Clara's reply was barely a whisper. "No, we brought it with us somewhere in the blackness." The lantern man laughed, soft and certain, as though the whole thing had been his plan from the start. 2 weeks later, Hollow Creek police reported a string of disappearances. All the missing were last seen near the old Ashford Bridge, the same bridge where Ethan and Clara were found, and conscious but unharmed, the night they returned. Neither of them spoke about what happened, not to the police, not to friends, not to each other. But sometimes, when the street lamps outside Ethan's window flickered, he swore he could hear the faint sound of glass clinking, and the rustle of a coat moving just out of sight. And every night, just before sleep, he saw the same image in his mind, a lantern, shattered on the ground, and a shadow bending down to pick up the pieces. Because some doors don't close, they wait.